I think one of the really important things to stress is, though of course we're delighted that Alsu and Evan are free, but this doesn't mean that Russia has turned a corner or that Russia now suddenly has press freedom. Russia is one of the most restrictive environments for journalists worldwide. It was the fourth largest jailer of journalists worldwide in 2023, and most of the targeting of journalists is of domestic journalists, of local journalists, not just inside Russia, but increasingly those journalists who've gone into exile in order to be able to report freely, and that's of major concern. We've seen Russia increasingly use tactics such as issuing arrest warrants for journalists, issuing charges against journalists outside of the country. And of course that's challenging when you're a journalist, because what that means is if you have a criminal charge against you, it can be challenging to travel to other countries. Russia has made no secret of the fact that it's prepared even to poison and kill its enemies abroad, and that's a concern for us, for journalists who are in exile. This exchange is a huge deal. It's one of the largest prisoner exchanges since the Cold War, and I think unfortunately demonstrates perhaps a new chapter in international diplomacy, which is international state-sanctioned hostage-taking. Well, of course the dangers of that are, if you know that ultimately taking an innocent individual, a journalist, a high-profile individual, and holding them as effectively a bargaining chip for the release of your own citizens, that will incentivize governments, and particularly authoritarian regimes like that of Russia, to do this again. Ultimately, it's been successful. So what really needs to happen is to disincentivize that hostage taking in the first place, to make governments realize that there are actually penalties for doing so. The likes of targeted sanctions, for example, the kind of Magnitsky-style sanctions that we've seen used elsewhere to penalize specific individuals in authoritarian regimes who are engaged in limiting the human rights of others. Those are the kinds of things that we might expect to see now, to make sure that we're not incentivizing this state-sponsored hostage-taking, this so-called hostage diplomacy.